Jungkook makes a promise under a lunar eclipse. When the light returns, Jimin realizes he is the only hope he holds. A lunar eclipse binds Jungkook to a dangerous promise, and when darkness lifts, Jimin discovers he alone carries the fragile hope that remains. The first scream came from Jungkook's own throat. The sky above Seoul had turned the color of bruised plum, the lunar eclipse swallowing the moon in slow, deliberate bites, and the wind howled through the abandoned observatory like something alive. Dust spiraled across the cracked floor as Jungkook staggered backward, clutching his chest, his breath tearing in ragged bursts. "Don't look at it," Jimin shouted, but Jungkook already had. The moon, half devoured, bled a dull red glow that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. A low hum vibrated through the metal railings, through the soles of his boots, through his bones. He tasted iron. "I can hear them," Jungkook whispered, voice trembling, eyes wide with a terror that made him look impossibly young. "They're calling my name." Jimin grabbed his shoulders, fingers digging in hard enough to ground him. "There's no one here, it's just the wind, just the eclipse. Stay with me." But Jungkook's gaze had gone distant, fixed on something beyond the ruined dome, beyond the red moon, beyond the world they knew. The observatory had been condemned years ago after a fire gutted its interior. Charred beams still smelled faintly of smoke when the air grew damp. Tonight, the scent returned, sharp and acrid, threading through the cold. Jimin noticed it only when Jungkook began to shake. "You promised," Jungkook said, though Jimin had no memory of making any promise. "Under the dark moon, you promised you wouldn't let them take me." Jimin's throat tightened. Jungkook's fear was contagious, crawling under his skin like static. "No one is taking you," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "You're not alone, not now, not ever." The wind died. Silence fell so abruptly it rang. Then the temperature dropped. Frost crept across the cracked tiles in delicate white veins, spreading from Jungkook's feet outward. His breath fogged in the air, each exhale thinner than the last. The red light from the eclipsed moon poured through the broken dome and painted his face in blood-colored shadows. Jimin had seen Jungkook afraid before, stage fright before their first performance, the quiet panic after his father's funeral, but never like this. This was a primal terror, the kind that lived in the marrow. "They said the eclipse is a door," Jungkook murmured, "a door that only opens for the marked." Jimin swallowed. "Who said that?" Jungkook's lips parted, but no sound came out. His pupils dilated until the brown vanished, leaving only black. He looked not possessed, but claimed. The hum returned, deeper now, resonating through the observatory's skeleton. The metal railings vibrated with a high, keening note. Somewhere below them, glass shattered. Jimin pulled Jungkook into an embrace without thinking, wrapping his arms tight as if he could anchor him to the world by sheer force. Jungkook's hands clutched the back of his coat, fingers cold as ice. "If they take me," Jungkook whispered into his shoulder, "don't follow." Jimin's grip tightened. "I will always follow." A tremor shuddered through Jungkook's body. For a moment, the red glow intensified, flaring so bright Jimin had to squeeze his eyes shut. The air smelled of ozone and burnt metal. When the light faded, Jungkook sagged against him, limp but breathing. The hum ceased. The frost stopped spreading. The eclipse reached totality, the moon now a dark coin rimmed in fire. Jimin eased Jungkook to the floor, heart hammering. "Stay with me," he whispered, brushing damp hair from Jungkook's forehead. His skin was clammy, but warmth was slowly returning. Jungkook's lashes fluttered. "Did it close?" "The door?" Jimin asked, unsure why the word felt heavy in his mouth. Jungkook nodded faintly. Jimin glanced up at the blackened moon. The red halo had begun to fade, silver light bleeding back along its edge. "Yes," he said softly, "it closed." Jungkook exhaled, a fragile sound that seemed to carry weeks of exhaustion. His fingers found Jimin's wrist and held on, not tightly, but with quiet insistence, as if verifying something solid remained. "You stayed," Jungkook said. "I told you," Jimin replied, though his voice shook. "I always will." He didn't tell Jungkook about the frost that had crept toward him, but stopped inches from his boots, as if an invisible boundary protected him. He didn't mention the whisper he thought he heard when the light flared, his own name, spoken in a voice that sounded eerily like Jungkook's. Outside, the wind resumed, gentler now, carrying the distant hum of the city returning to its ordinary rhythm. The world had not ended. Cars still moved, neon lights still blinked. Somewhere, someone laughed. But inside the observatory, something had changed. Jimin felt it in the way Jungkook's hand refused to let go, in the way the returning moonlight revealed faint, branching marks along Jungkook's collarbone, like veins etched in silver, in the way his own chest ached with a certainty he could not explain. When the last shadow slipped from the moon and its full light spilled into the ruined dome, Jungkook looked up at him, not with fear this time, but with a fragile, dawning realization. "You're the only one it couldn't touch," Jungkook whispered. Jimin opened his mouth to deny it, but the words died on his tongue. Because he knew it was true. The moonlight should have felt comforting when it returned, but to Jimin, it felt like exposure. They left the observatory just before dawn, Jungkook leaning heavily on him, as if his bones had forgotten how to hold him upright. The city below was waking, vendors rolling up shutters, buses coughing to life, the faint smell of frying oil drifting through the cold air. Normalcy pressed in from every side, indifferent to what had happened above it. Jimin kept his arm around Jungkook's waist. "You need a hospital." No, the answer came too quickly, too sharp. Jungkook's fingers tightened in the fabric of Jimin's sleeve. "No doctors, no tests, no questions. You collapsed. Your body temperature dropped below normal. That's not something you just sleep off." Jungkook stopped walking. The early morning light caught his face, revealing how pale he still was, how the silver vein marks along his collarbone had not faded but deepened, glimmering faintly beneath his skin like frost trapped in glass. "If they see this," Jungkook said, voice low, "they won't let me leave." Jimin opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He knew that tone. Jungkook wasn't being dramatic, he was being certain. "Then my place," Jimin said, "no arguments." For a moment, Jungkook's expression softened with something dangerously close to relief. "You always decide like that," he murmured. "And you always pretend you hate it." A ghost of a smile flickered, gone almost instantly. They didn't notice the black sedan idling across the street. Jimin's apartment was small but warm, filled with the faint scent of laundry detergent and coffee grounds. The familiarity of it all felt surreal after the observatory's cold, haunted silence. Jungkook sank onto the couch as if gravity had doubled, eyes closing for a brief moment. "Stay awake," Jimin said, kneeling in front of him. "Talk to me." Jungkook's eyes opened, dark and lucid. "You're scared." "I'm trying not to be." "That's not the same thing." Jimin huffed out a breath. "Fine, I'm terrified, happy." Jungkook studied him, something unreadable flickering behind his gaze. "You shouldn't be involved." "Too late," Jimin shot back. "You think you get to drag me into a haunted observatory during a lunar eclipse and then tell me to stay uninvolved." "I didn't drag you." "You asked me to come," Jimin said quietly, "and you knew I wouldn't say no." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unspoken over the years, every almost confession, every moment of hesitation, every time they chose safety over truth. Jungkook looked away first. "I started hearing them a month ago," he admitted. "At night, whispers, like someone speaking through water. I thought it was stress, lack of sleep, but then the marks appeared." He tugged his collar aside. The silver branching pattern had spread, delicate and sharp, like lightning frozen beneath his skin. Jimin's stomach dropped. "Does it hurt?" "It burns when the moon rises." Jungkook's voice remained calm, but his hands betrayed him, fingers trembling. "Last night was the first time it answered." "Answered what?" Jungkook's gaze snapped back to his. "My name." The air in the room felt suddenly thinner. Before Jimin could respond, a knock echoed through the apartment. 3 precise taps. Jungkook's entire body went rigid. Don't open it. Jimin frowned. It's probably the landlord. Another 3 taps, identical, measured. Not the landlord. Jimin stood anyway. We can't just. Jungkook grabbed his wrist. The contact was electric, cold and urgent. Jimin, if you open that door, everything changes. Jimin held his gaze. Everything already changed. He pulled his wrist free and opened the door. 2 people stood in the hallway, dressed in dark, nondescript coats that seemed to swallow the light. Their expressions were polite but empty, like masks worn too long. Park Jimin, the woman asked. Jimin stiffened. Who's asking? She held up an ID too quickly for him to read. We're with a government research division. We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding an incident at the Hanyul Observatory last night. Jimin's heart slammed against his ribs. I don't know what you're talking about. Behind him, Jungkook had gone utterly silent. The man's gaze drifted past Jimin's shoulder, focusing on Jungkook with unsettling intensity. Mr. Jungkook, he said softly, we've been looking for you. Jimin stepped fully into the doorway, blocking the view. He's not going anywhere. The woman's smile sharpened. You misunderstand. This is not a request. Jungkook's voice came from behind him, steady but strained. Jimin, don't. Jimin ignored him. You don't have a warrant. The man tilted his head, studying Jimin as though he were an unexpected variable. You were present during totality. Interesting. Most civilians lose consciousness within proximity. A chill crawled up Jimin's spine. What are you talking about? The woman's eyes flicked to Jungkook again. The marked rarely survive first contact. We need to contain the situation. Contain, Jimin repeated, anger flaring hot and sudden. He's not a disease. Jungkook rose from the couch. His movements were slow but deliberate. It's okay, he said quietly. This was always going to happen. Jimin turned on him. You knew. I suspected. Jungkook's gaze softened, something like apology lingering in his eyes. They monitor eclipses, patterns, people like me. People like you, Jimin echoed, voice breaking. You mean people they can experiment on? The man in the hallway sighed faintly, as if patience were a limited resource. Mr. Park, step aside. Jimin didn't move. The temperature in the apartment dropped. The lights flickered once. Jungkook inhaled sharply, hand flying to his chest, where the silver marks pulsed faintly through his shirt. The air hummed, low, familiar, wrong. The woman's composure cracked for the first time. It's reacting, she whispered. Jimin felt it too now, the pressure, like deep water pressing against his ears, the faint metallic taste on his tongue. He looked back at Jungkook, whose eyes had begun to darken, pupils swallowing the brown. Jungkook, he said, voice unsteady, stay with me. Jungkook's gaze locked onto his, terror and trust colliding in equal measure. You promised, he breathed. The hum surged. The windows rattled. A thin fracture snaked across the glass. The man in the hallway reached into his coat. We are out of time. Jimin stepped forward, placing himself fully between them and Jungkook. You touch him, he said, every word trembling with fury and fear, and I swear you'll regret it. The lights exploded. Darkness swallowed the room in a rush of shattered glass and ringing silence. When the emergency glow from the hallway finally spilled across the floor, Jungkook was on his knees, gasping, the silver marks blazing like veins of moonlight beneath his skin. And Jimin realized, with a clarity that stole his breath, that whatever had chosen Jungkook had noticed him too. The silence, after the lights burst, felt louder than the explosion itself. Jimin's ears rang as if the world had been plunged underwater. The hallway's dim emergency light painted everything in sickly amber, shards of glass across the floor, the warped outline of the doorway, the 2 agents frozen mid-motion as though time itself had stuttered. And Jungkook. He was still on his knees. Silver light pulsed beneath his skin, each branching vein along his collarbone and throat glowing with a cold, lunar shimmer. His hands were braced against the floor, fingers splayed, trembling as if he were holding back an invisible weight pressing down on him. Jungkook, Jimin whispered, dropping beside him. Look at me, stay with me. Jungkook's breathing came in shallow bursts. It's louder, he rasped. They're not whispering anymore. The female agent recovered first. Sedate him, she snapped. The man lunged forward. Jimin reacted without thinking. He shoved the agent back, the force surprising even himself. Don't touch him. The agent staggered, then straightened, eyes narrowing. You are interfering with a containment protocol. He's not a protocol, Jimin shot back. He's a person. The temperature plunged again. Frost spiderwebbed across the broken window frame, creeping inward like a living thing. The agents hesitated, exchanging a glance that was equal parts fear and calculation. Jungkook's voice cracked. Jimin, it hurts. Jimin grabbed his hand. It was ice cold, but the moment their skin touched, the hum in the air shifted, lower, steadier, as if recognizing a pattern. The male agent noticed. His gaze sharpened. Contact is stabilizing him. The woman's expression darkened. That's not possible. Civilians are repelled. Jimin barely heard them. He tightened his grip. You're not alone. You hear me. Whatever this is, you're not facing it alone. Jungkook's eyes lifted to his, pupils still blown wide, but there buried deep was recognition, trust, fear. You shouldn't be able to stand this close, Jungkook whispered. They said anyone unmarked would break. Well, Jimin said hoarsely, I've always been stubborn. A sudden crack split the air. The last intact window shattered inward, shards scattering across the floor like ice. Wind roared into the apartment, carrying a distant, layered sound, voices overlapping in a language Jimin couldn't understand, yet somehow felt he almost remembered. The agents flinched. Jungkook screamed. The sound tore from his throat raw and unfiltered, reverberating through the walls. The silver veins blazed brighter, spreading up his neck toward his jaw, down his arms beneath his sleeves. Do something, the woman shouted. I am doing something, Jimin yelled back, pulling Jungkook into him, arms wrapped tight around his shaking frame. I'm not letting him go. The voices in the wind grew louder, rising and falling like a tide. The air smelled of ozone and winter. Jimin's own skin prickled, a burning chill crawling across his arms. Then, for a heartbeat, he heard it clearly. His name. Not from Jungkook, not from the agents, from everywhere. Jimin froze. The hum surged, then faltered. Jungkook's scream broke into a sob. They see you now, he choked. They see you because of me. Jimin swallowed the spike of fear. Then they'll have to deal with both of us. The male agent stepped forward again, slower this time, cautious. Mr. Park, he said, voice tight, you are exhibiting resonance. That should not be possible without prior exposure. I don't know what you're talking about, Jimin snapped, though his chest burned, a faint ache spreading beneath his ribs. The woman activated something on her wrist. A thin, metallic device unfolded with a soft hiss, emitting a high-frequency whine that set Jimin's teeth on edge. Jungkook convulsed. No, Jimin shouted, shielding him. It's a dampener, she said coldly. If we don't suppress the signal, whatever is trying to manifest through him will complete the bridge. Bridge, Jimin's voice cracked. You're talking like he's a doorway. The agents didn't answer. That silence was answer enough. Jungkook's fingers dug into Jimin's jacket. Don't let them turn me into a door, he whispered, voice breaking. I don't want to disappear. You won't, Jimin said fiercely. I won't let you. The dampener's whine intensified. The silver glow flickered erratically beneath Jungkook's skin like a dying signal. His body slackened, head falling against Jimin's shoulder. For a terrifying moment, he went completely still. Jungkook, Jimin's voice dropped to a whisper. Hey, hey, stay with me. Nothing. The hum vanished. The frost stopped spreading. The voices in the wind cut off mid-echo. The woman lowered the device slowly. Signal suppressed, she said, though her tone held no triumph, only unease, but the resonance transfer. Her gaze shifted to Jimin. He felt it then, faint but unmistakable. A cold thread coiling beneath his skin, like the first touch of winter against bone. His breath hitched. The male agent took a careful step back. "You've been marked," he said quietly. Jimin looked down. Just above his wrist, where Jungkook's hand had clung to him, a thin S-Y-R-Y-B-R-E-S-T-I-Y line glimmered beneath the skin, delicate, branching, undeniable. "No," Jimin whispered. Jungkook stirred weakly against him, eyes fluttering open. His gaze fell to Jimin's wrist, and the horror there was sharper than any scream. "I told you not to follow," Jungkook breathed. Jimin closed his hand around Jungkook, ignoring the cold spreading through his veins. "You really thought I'd let you face this alone?" Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Inside the shattered apartment, the agent stood frozen between duty and fear, the dampener humming softly in the woman's hand. And for the first time since the eclipse, Jungkook looked at Jimin not with fear for himself, but with fear for him. The sirens grew louder, not the distant wail of ordinary patrol cars, but the layered, urgent chorus of multiple vehicles converging with purpose. Jimin barely noticed. He stared at the S-Y-R-Y-B-R-E-S-T-I-Y line beneath his skin, the delicate branching mark that pulsed faintly with each heartbeat. It was colder than the rest of him, as if winter had found a way inside his veins. Jungkook's hand tightened around his wrist. "This isn't supposed to happen," he whispered, voice raw. "It doesn't choose to." The female agent recovered her composure first. "Contain both," she said sharply. The words snapped Jimin back to the present. "You're not taking us anywhere," he said, rising slowly, pulling Jungkook with him. Jungkook swayed, still weak, but he didn't let go. The male agent lifted his hands slightly, placating. "Mr. Park, you don't understand the scale of what's happening. If the resonance stabilizes between you, the bridge may fully form." "You keep saying bridge," Jimin shot back. "Maybe try explaining what that actually means." The woman hesitated. It was brief, but Jimin caught it, a flicker of doubt or perhaps calculation. "It means," she said finally, "that something on the other side is trying to cross into this reality, and it has found an anchor." Her gaze settled on Jungkook. Jimin felt Jungkook flinch beside him. "And now," the agent continued, eyes sliding to Jimin's wrist, "it has found a second anchor, a stabilizer." Jimin let out a humorless laugh. "You're talking about us like we're equipment." "You are vectors," she corrected. The word hit harder than he expected. Jungkook's voice trembled. "Jimin, if they're right." "No," Jimin cut in, more forcefully than he intended. "They don't get to decide what we are." The dampener in the woman's hand whined again, its pitch rising as if reacting to the tension between them. Jungkook's grip tightened. The faint glow under both their skins pulsed in uneven sync, like two heartbeats trying to find the same rhythm. "Do you feel that?" Jungkook whispered. Jimin did, a pull, not painful, not exactly. More like gravity shifting, like standing on the edge of a vast drop and knowing, with terrifying certainty, that if he leaned forward even slightly, something immense would answer. "Yes," he admitted. Jungkook's eyes shone with unshed tears. "I dragged you into this." "You didn't drag me anywhere," Jimin said softly. "I walked in, I stayed, that's on me." The apartment door slammed open behind the agents. Mori figures flooded the hallway, uniformed personnel in dark tactical gear, faces obscured behind visors. Their movements were precise, practiced, not police, not military, something in between. Jimin's stomach dropped. The female agent cursed under her breath. They escalated faster than expected. One of the new arrivals stepped forward. "Asset retrieval authorized," he announced, voice distorted through his helmet. "All non-compliant subjects will be neutralized." Jungkook went rigid, neutralized. Jimin's pulse roared in his ears. Over my dead body. The tactical officer tilted his head. That can be arranged. The air changed. It wasn't a sound, not at first, more like pressure. The same deep humming weight from the observatory returned, pressing against Jimin's skull, his ribs, the fragile space between heartbeats. The silver marks on Jungkook's skin flared brighter in response. No, Jungkook whispered, panic rising. It's reacting to the threat. The dampener screamed, its tone spiking into a painful frequency. The female agent winced, struggling to keep it steady. If they fire, the resonance will spike. You'll tear the veil. Then call them off, Jimin shouted. She hesitated. The tactical officer raised his weapon. Time seemed to fracture. Jimin didn't think, he moved. He stepped directly in front of Jungkook, arms spread, an instinct older than fear driving him. You want him, he said, voice shaking but loud, you go through me. Jungkook's breath hitched behind him. Jimin, don't. The silver line on Jimin's wrist burned. Not with cold this time, but heat, searing, electric. It shot up his arm in branching streaks, mirroring Jungkook's marks. The hum surged into a roar. The lights in the hallway flickered violently. The tactical officer froze. Every visor turned toward Jimin. The air warped. For a split second, Jimin saw something layered over the corridor, an impossible geometry, angles that didn't belong to the world, a vast shadow pressing against a membrane too thin to hold it back. Voices overlapped in 1,000 tones, not speaking but yearning. Jimin gasped. Jungkook's hands gripped his shoulders from behind. You're opening it, he choked. Jimin, stop, please stop. I don't know how, Jimin cried. The female agent dropped the dampener. It clattered across the floor, its whine cutting off abruptly. Everyone stand down, she shouted, weapons lowered now. No one moved. The shadow pressed closer. Jungkook's voice broke. If the bridge forms, it won't just take me, it will take everything it can reach. Jimin's vision blurred. The burning in his veins intensified, the pull becoming unbearable, like being stretched between two worlds. Then tell me how to close it, he shouted. Jungkook's hands slid down to grip his own, fingers interlacing with desperate strength. You ground me, he said, voice shaking. You always have. When the noise gets too loud, you're the only thing that makes it stop. Jimin's heart slammed against his ribs. Then stay with me, he whispered. Don't listen to them, listen to me. The voices surged, furious. Jungkook squeezed his hands tighter. I'm here, he said, though tears spilled freely now. I'm here, I choose you. The burning in Jimin's veins faltered. The shadow recoiled. The impossible geometry shattered like glass, collapsing back into the narrow, battered hallway. The hum died, leaving only the ragged sound of human breathing. The tactical officer lowered his weapon first. Then another. And another. The female agent stared at Jimin and Jungkook, something like awe and fear unsettling her features. Resonance stabilized through emotional anchor, she murmured. That's unprecedented. Jungkook sagged against Jimin, exhausted but conscious. You're shaking, he whispered. So are you, Jimin replied. They stood there, holding each other amid broken glass and stunned silence, as if the world had narrowed to the space between their joined hands. Finally, the tactical officer spoke again, voice quieter now. New directive, he said. Both subjects are to be monitored, not retrieved. The words should have felt like relief. They didn't, because the mark on Jimin's arm was still there. And somewhere beyond the fragile boundary of their world, something that had almost crossed over now knew exactly who had stopped it. Morning arrived without warmth. Grey light seeped through the shattered windows of Jimin's apartment, illuminating the wreckage in unforgiving detail, splintered glass, frost scars melting into damp streaks, the dent in the wall where a tactical shield had slammed during the standoff. The agents were gone, their retreat as precise as their arrival, leaving behind only silence and a thin, metallic device the woman had abandoned in her haste. Jimin hadn't slept. He sat on the floor with his back against the couch, Jungkook's head resting against his shoulder. At some point during the long, trembling hours before dawn, exhaustion had dragged Jungkook into a shallow, restless sleep. Even now, his fingers were curled into the fabric of Jimin's shirt, as if letting go might send him slipping into some unseen current. Jimin stared at his wrist. The silver mark had spread overnight. What had begun as a single delicate line had branched into a faint lattice across the inside of his forearm, pale and luminous under the morning light. It didn't hurt. That was the most unsettling part. It felt natural, as though his body had always been meant to hold it. Jungkook stirred. "You're doing it again," he murmured, voice thick with sleep. "Doing what?" "Staring like if you look hard enough, it'll disappear." Jimin let out a quiet breath. "I was hopping." Jungkook pushed himself upright, wincing as stiffness set into his muscles. His own marks had dimmed to a faint sheen, but they were still there, threading up his neck like frozen lightning. He noticed Jimin's arm and went very still. "It spread," he said softly. "Yeah." Silence settled between them, heavy with everything neither of them wanted to say. Jungkook looked away first. "This is my fault." Jimin's head snapped toward him. "Don't. If I hadn't asked you to come to the observatory." "You think this started there?" Jimin interrupted, sharper than he intended. "You said you've been hearing them for a month. You were already in this. I just showed up late." Jungkook's jaw tightened. "You weren't supposed to be part of it." "And yet," Jimin said, lifting his marked arm slightly, "here we are." The words hung in the air, edged with something raw and unspoken. Jungkook's voice dropped. "They called you by name." Jimin didn't answer. "Jimin," Jungkook pressed, eyes searching his face. "What did you hear?" He hesitated. The memory sat heavy in his chest, the layered voices, the impossible chorus, the way his name had threaded through it like a hook. "It wasn't just noise," he admitted finally. "It sounded desperate, like they weren't trying to hurt me, like they were trying to reach me." Jungkook's expression crumpled with a grief that looked far too old for him. "That's how it starts." Jimin swallowed. "You think they're victims?" "I think," Jungkook said carefully, "they're trapped, or lost, or both. And whatever is using me, using us, knows I can hear them." Jimin rubbed his face with his unmarked hand. "So we're what? A doorway and a translator." Jungkook gave a hollow laugh. "You're not a doorway." "That's not what the agents said." "They don't know everything," Jungkook snapped, sudden heat flaring in his voice. "They see anomalies and turn them into assets, variables, threat levels. They don't see people." "Neither do you," Jimin shot back before he could stop himself. The words landed like a slap. Jungkook recoiled. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," Jimin said, voice shaking, "you keep talking like you're already gone, like you've accepted that you're just a thing for them to study or a door for something to use. You're still here, you're still you, but you won't even fight for that." Jungkook's eyes flashed with hurt and anger. "You think I haven't been fighting? Every night for a month I've been drowning in voices that aren't mine, in cold that seeps into my bones, in dreams where I wake up somewhere that isn't here. I am fighting, Jimin. I'm just losing." The confession shattered something in the room. Jimin's anger drained, replaced by a hollow ache. "You should have told me." "And what?" Jungkook demanded. "So you could watch me disappear in slow motion, so you could try to fix something you can't fix." "I could have been there," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook's voice broke. "You are here, and look what it's done to you." His gaze fell to Jimin's arm again, horror naked in his expression. Jimin followed his gaze, then deliberately reached out and took Jungkook's hand, pressing their palms together over the silver marks. The reaction was immediate. A faint pulse of light traveled beneath both their skins, the lines aligning like mirrored constellations. The air hummed softly, not painful this time, but resonant, like two notes finally finding harmony. Jungkook sucked in a sharp breath. You feel that? Yes, Jimin whispered. It's karma. Jungkook's fingers tightened around his. You're stabilizing me. And you're stabilizing me, Jimin replied. For a moment, the fear receded. The cold in Jimin's veins eased. The faint pressure at the edges of his mind quieted. Then Jungkook pulled his hand away, as if burned. No, he said, shaking his head. This is how it spreads. Or, Jimin countered, this is how we survive. Before Jungkook could respond, the abandoned metallic device on the floor emitted a soft chime. Both of them froze. A thin blue light flickered to life along its edge, projecting a translucent interface into the air. Lines of text scrolled too fast to read, followed by a single message that stabilized in stark, clinical font. Dual resonance confirmed. Convergence window 72 hours. Jimin's stomach dropped. Convergence of what? Jungkook's face had gone pale. 72 hours until the bridge stabilizes, he whispered, or collapses. And if it stabilizes, Jimin asked. Jungkook looked at him, eyes full of a fear that felt bottomless. Then whatever is on the other side won't need me anymore. It'll have a permanent path. And if it collapses? Jungkook's voice was barely audible. Then it takes the anchors with it. The device chimed again, as if punctuating the sentence. Jimin stared at it, then at Jungkook. So those are our options. We either let something invade our world or we disappear with the door. Jungkook didn't answer. Jimin let out a shaky laugh. That's not much of a choice. No, Jungkook agreed. It is. Outside, the city had fully awakened. Car horns blared. Someone argued on the street below. Life continued with relentless normalcy, unaware of the countdown that had just begun in a small, shattered apartment. Jimin looked at the spreading silver lines on his arm, then at Jungkook's trembling hands. 72 hours, he said slowly, then we don't waste a second of it. Jungkook's eyes searched his face. Doing what? Jimin met his gaze, fear and determination tangling in his chest, finding a third option. For the first time since the eclipse, something other than dread flickered in Jungkook's expression. Hope. It was fragile, terrifying, and far more dangerous than despair. The countdown did not feel real until the first hour passed. Jimin watched the minute digits on his phone change from 08:59 to 09:00 and felt the weight of it settle into his chest like a second heartbeat. 72 hours, now 71. Jungkook stood by the broken window, staring out at the city as if memorizing it. Morning traffic crawled below, people moving in purposeful lines, unaware that the sky above them might soon hold something other than clouds. You're thinking about leaving, Jimin said. Jungkook didn't turn. If I disappear, the bridge collapses. Jimin's jaw tightened. We're not doing that. You said you wanted a third option, Jungkook replied quietly. I'm giving you one. That's not an option, Jimin snapped. That's you volunteering to die. Jungkook finally faced him, eyes shadowed. You think I haven't considered the math? One life for millions. It's not even a debate. It is to me. The words hung between them, sharp and raw. Jungkook's voice softened, dangerously gentle. You're biased. Of course I'm biased, Jimin shot back. You're not one life, you're you. Jungkook laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's exactly why I'm expendable, because if it comes down to it, you won't choose the world over me. Jimin stepped closer, anger and fear burning through him. Don't put that on me. Don't turn this into some noble sacrifice fantasy so you don't have to fight. Jungkook's expression hardened. You think I want this? You think I want to be the reason something comes through that door? I think you're terrified, Jimin said, voice dropping, and you're trying to control the outcome before it can take you by surprise. The accusation landed. Jungkook flinched. Silence stretched, thick with unspoken truths. Finally, Jungkook whispered, every night I hear them screaming. Jimin's anger faltered. They're not monsters, Jungkook continued, voice shaking. They're people, or they were. I don't know where they are or what that place is, but they're trapped between something and nothing, and whatever is pushing them toward us, it doesn't care if they survive the crossing. Jimin's chest tightened. So you think opening the bridge saves them? I think it destroys them, Jungkook said, but closing it might erase them completely, and I don't know which is worse. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Before Jimin could respond, his phone buzzed violently in his hand. Unknown number. He hesitated. Answer it, Jungkook said. Jimin put it on speaker. Hello. A familiar female voice filled the room. Mr. Park, this is Agent Han. Jimin's stomach twisted. How did you get this number? We have resources, she replied coolly. You've seen the projection, 72 hours. You don't have time to pretend this isn't happening. Jungkook moved closer, listening. What do you want? Jimin asked. To help you survive, she said, both of you if possible. Jungkook let out a bitter breath, if possible. Agent Han didn't deny it. Dual resonance is unprecedented. Our models didn't predict emotional stabilization as a factor. Jimin frowned, speak human. A pause, then quieter. Your attachment to each other is preventing escalation. Heat crept up Jimin's neck. That's not. It's measurable, she cut in. When you are in physical contact, the resonance harmonizes. When separated, the signal spikes. If you remain within proximity, the convergence window may extend. Jungkook's eyes widened. You're saying we can buy time. I'm saying, Agent Han replied, you can delay the inevitable, but delay is not resolution. Jimin paced the room, mind racing. Then help us find a resolution. Silence. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its clinical edge. There may be a way to redirect the bridge, to open it somewhere uninhabited, contained. Jungkook's brow furrowed. You want to open it on purpose. To prevent uncontrolled emergence in a populated area, she said. If the bridge must form, we choose where. Jimin stopped packing, and if it can't be closed. Another pause. Then we ensure it is as far from humanity as possible. The implication hit like a physical blow. Jungkook whispered, you're talking about exile. Agent Han didn't respond. Jimin's grip tightened on the phone. You don't get to decide that. You are already part of this, she said softly, whether you cooperate or not. The line went dead. The apartment fell into silence again, broken only by the distant noise of the city and the faint hum that seemed to live in Jimin's bones now. Jungkook sank onto the couch, hands covering his face. An uninhabited place, he murmured, a controlled opening, that's just a prettier word for abandonment. Jimin sat beside him, or containment. For who? Jungkook asked, looking up. For whatever's trying to come through, or for us? Jimin didn't have an answer. Jungkook's voice dropped to a whisper. If they move the bridge and it locks onto us, we might never come back. The words settled heavily between them. Jimin reached out, hesitated, then took Jungkook's hand again. The familiar pulse of warmth spread through both of them, steadying, anchoring. We're not going anywhere, Jimin said, though he wasn't sure if he was promising Jungkook or himself. Not without a fight. Jungkook studied him, eyes searching for doubt. Why? He asked softly. Why are you still here, after everything, after you saw what I'm becoming? Jimin's throat tightened. He could lie, he could deflect. He could pretend this was just loyalty, just friendship, just stubbornness. Instead, he said the truth. Because losing you, he whispered, would be worse than whatever comes through that door. Jungkook's breath caught. For a moment, the hum in the air softened, as if the unseen thing pressing against reality had paused to listen. Jungkook's fingers tightened around Jimin, trembling. You shouldn't say things like that, he said, voice unsteady. Why not? Because I might believe you. Jimin met his gaze, You should. The world did not end. The ceiling did not collapse. The sky did not split open. But something shifted, quiet, irreversible, and far more dangerous than any supernatural force. Jungkook leaned forward, resting his forehead against Jimin's. Their marks pulsed in gentle synchrony, no longer clashing, no longer burning. 71 hours, Jungkook murmured. Jimin closed his eyes. Then we make every second count. Outside, the sun climbed higher, bright and indifferent. Somewhere beyond the thin veil of their world, something waited. And now it was waiting for both of them. By the second night, the city no longer felt like home. Jimin realized it when he flinched at the reflection of headlights on glass, mistaking it for the silver flare beneath his skin. Every surface had become suspect. Every shadow felt too deep, too layered, as if reality had developed a second, hidden dimension that only he and Jungkook could sense. They had not separated once. Agent Han's words echoed in both their minds. Proximity stabilizes the resonance. So they stayed within arm's reach, through the tense silence of afternoon, through the uneasy attempt at eating instant noodles neither of them tasted, through the restless packing that carved invisible paths into Jimin's floor. By nightfall, the hum returned. It began as a faint vibration in the air, like distant machinery, but Jimin felt it first in his bones. The mark on his arm shimmered faintly, a cold glow bleeding through his sleeve. Jungkook noticed immediately, "It's stronger tonight." Jimin nodded. "It's like it's testing the distance." "Or testing us," Jungkook said. They stood in the center of the living room, hands loosely linked, as if daring the unseen force to try again. The lights flickered. The temperature dropped. And then, without warning, the walls shifted. Not physically, not in a way that could be measured, but the space felt wrong, stretched thin, like a photograph pulled too tight at the edges. The corners of the room darkened, shadows deepening into shapes that almost resembled doorways. Jimin's breath caught. "Do you see that?" "Yes," Jungkook whispered. "Don't look too long." Too late. For a fraction of a second, one of the shadows moved against the grain of reality, folding inward like an eye blinking open. A rush of whispers spilled into the room, not screaming this time, but pleading. Jimin staggered. They're asking for help." Jungkook's grip tightened painfully. "Don't listen. If you answer, they'll find the path." "But they sound human," Jungkook snapped, voice breaking. "That's how they get you." The shadow blinked again. A hand pressed against the inside of it. Not fully formed, not solid, just the impression of fingers straining against a membrane that rippled like water under pressure. Jimin's heart slammed. "They're trapped." Jungkook's voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "So are we." The hand pushed harder. The hum surged into a deafening roar. The silver marks on both their bodies flared, light racing along the branching lines. Pain shot up Jimin's arm, sharp and electric. He cried out, dropping to one knee. "Jimin," Jungkook knelt with him, panic flooding his voice. "Stay with me, don't let it pull you." "It's not pulling," Jimin gasped. "It's reaching." The distinction terrified him. The shadow bulged inward, the outline of a face pressing through, featureless, distorted, yet unmistakably desperate. The air filled with overlapping voices, fragments of words tumbling over each other. "Cold. Please. Lost. Open." Jungkook squeezed his eyes shut. "Stop looking." "I can't," Jimin choked. "There." The shadow ruptured. A crack split the wall with a sound like breaking ice. A thin fissure of silver light tore through the air, hovering inches from the floor, pulsing like a wound in space itself. The temperature plummeted. Frost raced across the floorboards. The smell of ozone and something older, damp stone, forgotten earth, flooded the room. Jungkook's voice shook violently. "It's forming early. That's not supposed to happen." Jimin stared at the fissure. Beyond it, there was no clear image, only shifting darkness and flickers of pale movement like silhouettes passing behind fogged glass. One of them stopped. A shape leaned closer to the tier. And then, unmistakably, a voice emerged, clearer than the rest. Jungkook. Jungkook went rigid. Jimin's head snapped toward him. You know that voice. Jungkook's face drained of color. No, he whispered. I don't, but it knows me. The voice came again, layered with static and distance. Jungkook, open the way. Jungkook shook his head violently. No, no, I won't. The fissure pulsed brighter, as if responding to his refusal. The shadows behind it writhed, pressing closer. Jimin forced himself to stand, despite the pain burning up his arm. He stepped between Jungkook and the tier, heart hammering. If you want him, he said, voice shaking but loud, you go through me. The moment the words left his mouth, the fissure reacted. Light surged along Jimin's mark, racing to his palm. The air warped, pressure slamming into his chest. The voices rose in a frantic chorus. Jungkook grabbed him from behind. Jimin, stop, you're anchoring it. I'm stopping it, Jimin gasped. It's not getting to you. The voice from the fissure shifted, no longer pleading, now curious. 2 anchors. The shadows behind it stilled. For a horrifying second, the pressure vanished. The hum cut out entirely, leaving a vacuum of sound that made Jimin's ears ring. Then the fissure began to close. Not violently, not abruptly, slowly, like an eye losing interest. The silver light dimmed, the crack in the air thinned to a thread, then to nothing. The shadows snapped back into ordinary darkness. The room returned, scarred, frostbitten, but solid. Jimin collapsed forward, lungs heaving. Jungkook caught him, arms wrapping tight around his chest. You idiot, he whispered, voice breaking. You absolute idiot, you could have torn it open. But I didn't, Jimin rasped. We didn't. They stayed like that on the floor, tangled together, the cold slowly receding from the room. Minutes passed before Jungkook spoke again. It said 2 anchors, he murmured. That's new. Jimin closed his eyes. Maybe that's why it stopped. Or maybe, Jungkook said quietly, it's learning. The thought settled heavily between them. Jimin forced himself to sit up. If it can adapt, we can too. Jungkook let out a hollow laugh. You say that like we have any idea what we're doing. We stopped it, Jimin insisted. Not with a machine, not with their protocols, with us. Jungkook studied him, something fragile flickering in his gaze. You really believe that's enough? No, Jimin admitted, but it's a start. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, though the sky had been clear minutes ago. The air smelled faintly of rain and ozone, the atmosphere itself seeming unsettled by what had almost occurred. Jungkook rested his forehead against Jimin's shoulder, exhaustion finally overtaking him. 60 hours, he murmured. Jimin tightened his arms around him. Then, we keep holding the line. In the quiet that followed, neither of them noticed the faint S-Y-R-Y-B-R-E-S-T-A-Y glow lingering on the wall where the fissure had been, like a scar that refused to fade. And somewhere beyond the veil, something that had almost crossed over was no longer pleading. It was waiting. The rain began without clouds. Jimin noticed it first as a soft tapping against the broken window, a delicate, irregular rhythm that didn't match the stillness of the sky. He rose from the floor slowly, careful not to wake Jungkook, whose breathing had finally deepened into something resembling real sleep. Outside, the city glistened. Drops struck the pavement and spread into S-Y-R-Y-B-R-E-S-T-A-Y ripples that shimmered faintly even in the dim streetlight. No storm rolled in. No thunder followed. The rain simply existed, falling from a clear, starless sky like a quiet contradiction. Jimin's mark pulsed. He swallowed hard. Behind him, Jungkook stirred. It's starting again, he murmured, voice rough with exhaustion. Jimin didn't turn. It's raining. Jungkook pushed himself upright, wincing as he crossed the room to stand beside him. When he saw the ripples spreading across the street below, his expression tightened. "That's not rain," he said. As if in answer, one of the droplets struck the window frame and did not slide down. It clung there, trembling, then spread into a thin, luminous film that crawled along the glass like frost. The temperature dropped. Jimin exhaled slowly. "Tell me that's normal in your new nightmare handbook." Jungkook shook his head. "It's not supposed to manifest like this, not without a full bridge." The rain intensified. Not heavier, closer. The droplets seemed to fall more slowly now, as if gravity had loosened its grip. Each bead hovered a fraction too long before touching ground, each impact sending faint ripples through the air itself. Jimin's ears popped. The pressure was back. "Stay close," Jungkook said, his hand finding Jimin's instinctively. The contact sent a faint warmth through Jimin's arm, steadying the cold creeping along his veins. A sound rose from the street below. Not voices, not quite. A chorus of tones, high and low, layered like distant singing heard underwater. The ripples on the pavement began to align, forming concentric patterns that pulsed in slow, deliberate rhythms. Jimin's stomach twisted. "It's like it's mapping something." "Or calibrating," Jungkook whispered. A figure stepped into the street. Jimin froze. The man moved with stiff, mechanical precision, his face slack, eyes unfocused. Rain struck his shoulders and spread into veins across his coat, seeping into the fabric as if searching for skin beneath. "Is he?" Jimin couldn't finish. Jungkook's voice was hollow. "He's alive." The man stopped directly beneath the window. Slowly, his head tilted upward. His eyes were wrong. Not empty, not possessed, just unfixed, as if he were looking at two places at once. The singing tones intensified. Mori figures emerged from doorways and alleys, drawn into the street by the unnatural rain. They stood in loose formation, faces turned upward, their expressions eerily serene. Jimin's grip tightened on Jungkook's hand. "They're being called." "No," Jungkook said, horror dawning. "They're being tuned." The word hit like a physical blow. One of the figures, a woman in a soaked cardigan, raised her hand slowly, fingers trembling as lines spread across her skin where the rain touched. She didn't scream. She smiled. Jimin's pulse roared. "We have to stop this." "How?" Jungkook demanded, panic breaking through. "If we interfere, it might accelerate the bridge." "And if we do," Jimin shot back, "they turn into what? Anchors, conduits." Below, the woman's smile widened unnaturally. Her mouth opened. The sound that emerged was not human. It was the same layered tone Jimin had heard in the fissure, harmonic, resonant, wrong. The other figures joined, their voices blending into a single, vibrating chord that made the glass in the window frame tremble. Jungkook clutched his head. "It's too loud." Jimin pulled him closer. "Focus on me, not them, me." The marks on their skin pulsed in sync, their shared warmth pushing back against the cold, pressing in from outside. But the sound grew. The chord deepened, vibrating through the building's bones. Cracks spidered along the walls. The rain intensified, droplets now drifting sideways, defying gravity as if drawn toward the gathering below. Jimin's chest tightened. "They're forming something." Jungkook's eyes widened, a resonance field. As the words left his mouth, the figures in the street took a synchronized step forward. Their movements were slow, deliberate, perfectly aligned. The air split with a low, thunderous hum. A faint shimmer appeared above the asphalt, a distortion that bent the streetlights into warped arcs. The rain converged toward it, droplets merging into threads of liquid light that stretched upward like luminous veins. "It's happening without us," Jimin whispered. Jungkook shook his head violently. "No, it's happening because of us." The bridge is searching for stability. It's using them as a substitute. The woman in the cardigan turned her head sharply, too sharply, until her gaze locked onto the window. Onto Jungkook. Her smile vanished. "Anchor," she said, voice layered with the chorus. Jimin stepped in front of Jungkook without thinking. "Don't you dare." Her head tilted again, eyes unfocused. "Secondary anchor," she added, her gaze sliding to Jimin. The vertical shimmer pulsed brighter. Jungkook's voice broke. "They're triangulating." The figures below began to move toward the building. Slow steps, perfectly synchronized. Jimin's heart slammed. "We can't let them reach us." "If they touch us," Jungkook said, voice trembling, "the resonance could lock." The first figure reached the entrance. The building's front door burst open with a sound like splintering bone. Footsteps echoed in the stairwell. Jimin's mind raced. Fight them, run, hide. None of it felt real enough to work against something that bent physics like paper. Jungkook grabbed his arm. "We go up." "The roof?" Jimin asked. "If the bridge wants elevation, we give it instability," Jungkook said, words tumbling out in a rush. "Wind, open space, fewer surfaces for resonance to hold." The footsteps were closer now, too many, too synchronized. Jimin nodded, "Then move." They ran. Up the narrow stairwell, past flickering lights and peeling paint, the harmonic chorus rising behind them like a living tide. The air grew colder with each step, their breath fogging in the dim light. On the landing below, a voice echoed, layered, unified. "Do not resist." Jimin's lungs burned. "That's not creepy at all." Jungkook almost laughed, the sound breaking into a sob. "Keep going." They burst onto the roof. Wind slammed into them, sharp and freezing. The unnatural rain fell here too, droplets streaking sideways across the open space. The city stretched out in all directions, glittering and oblivious. For one fleeting second, it looked normal. Then the air above the roof warped. A faint vertical seam shimmered into existence, directly above them, threads of liquid light spiraling toward it from every direction. The harmonic chorus rose from below as the figures filled the stairwell, their footsteps reaching the final door. Jungkook grabbed Jimin's shoulders. "If it locks here." "I know," Jimin said, breathless. The rooftop door slammed open. The figures stepped out. Eyes unfocused, voices blending into that terrible chord. The skin glowed faintly where the rain touched, lines mapping their bodies like circuitry. "Anchors," they intoned. The seam above pulsed. Jimin's mark burned. Jungkook's grip tightened. "We hold each other, no matter what." Jimin nodded, heart pounding, "No matter what." They pulled each other close as the wind howled and the chorus swelled, the seam in the sky widening by a fraction that felt like the world holding its breath. And for the first time, the thing beyond the veil did not whisper. It listened. The night air felt heavier than ever, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the final truth to surface. Rain began to fall in thin, cold needles, soaking the empty streets and washing away the last traces of what they once called home. Inside the dimly lit room, no one spoke at first. The silence was louder than any argument they had ever thrown at each other. "You lied to me," Armin finally said, his voice breaking despite his effort to sound cold. "All this time, everything we built was standing on your secrets." Lena didn't look away. Her eyes were red, but no tears fell now. "I didn't lie to destroy you. I lied to protect you. There's a difference you refuse to see." "Protect me," he laughed bitterly, "by deciding my life for me, by turning everyone against me before I even knew the truth." Raka stepped forward, fists clenched. "You think you're the only victim here? We all paid the price. Your ambition burned everything in its path." "That's not fair," Lena snapped, the first crack in her composure. "You followed me, you believed in the same dream." "We believed in you," Raka replied quietly. That was our mistake. The words hung between them like a blade. Outside, thunder rolled, shaking the windows. The storm mirrored the chaos in their chests, years of loyalty, betrayal, love, and pride collapsing into a single unbearable moment. Armin turned toward the door. I'm done. No more schemes. No more sacrifices disguised as loyalty. If everything we built was a lie, then let it fall. You walk away now, Lena said, her voice trembling, and you erase everything we survived together. You erase me. He stopped, hand on the handle, but he didn't turn around. You erased yourself the moment you chose control over trust. The door opened. Wind and rain rushed in, scattering papers across the floor, plans, contracts, memories reduced to fragile sheets that no longer meant anything. Armin, wait, she whispered, the strength finally leaving her. For a moment, it seemed he might. The storm roared, the past clawed at him, and the future stood like an empty road, but he stepped out into the rain. Raka followed after a long pause, not to stop him, but to leave as well. He met Lena's eyes one last time, and what remained there was not anger, but exhaustion. We were a family once, he said softly. Families don't survive secrets like yours. When the door closed, Lena stood alone in the wreckage of her own decisions. The silence returned, deeper than before. She sank to the floor, surrounded by the ruins of ambition and the ghosts of voices that would never fill the room again. The storm eventually passed. Morning came with a pale, indifferent light. The city moved on, as it always does, swallowing yesterday's tragedies without a trace. Armin walked toward an uncertain future, carrying scars, but also a fragile freedom he had never known. Raka disappeared into the crowd, choosing distance over bitterness. Hopping time would dull what loyalty could not heal. And Lena remained behind, not as a villain or a hero, but as a woman who had reached too far, loved too fiercely, and learned too late that control is the loneliest form of power. In the end, nothing exploded, no final victory was declared. Only consequences remained, quiet, permanent, and painfully human. Their story did not end with forgiveness, it ended with truth.